It was 3:42 p.m. when the package arrived. Ryan Cooper didn't notice it at first. He was working from his home office in their airy Portland bungalow, headphones on, fingers dancing across the keyboard as rain softly tapped the windows. His wife, Elena, was out, again, this time for a strategy retreat with former colleagues in Seattle. The kids were still at school. The house was quiet, too quiet for a man who, up until a few months ago, would have described his life as almost perfect. The doorbell rang once, a single chime, the kind that carried with it no urgency, but left a strange unease in its wake. Ryan, distracted, made a mental note to check it after finishing his sprint. What he didn't know in that moment was that this small, ordinary box, sitting by the door, would become the opening act in the most brutal performance of his life. A performance that would unravel 12 years of marriage, tear at the very roots of fatherhood, and leave behind a version of him he didn't yet know existed. But long before the package, before the quiet unraveling, there was a time Ryan believed in everything. He believed in the slow dance of Sunday mornings, pancakes sizzling in the pan, the kids laughing in the background, Elena humming her favorite jazz tune as sunlight poured in through the kitchen window. He believed in their love, in the decades-long build of their connection. She was radiant, intelligent, magnetic, a storm in high heels, and he adored her. When Elena walked into a room, conversations paused. When she smiled, Ryan felt like the only man in the world. They met in grad school. She was studying marketing. He was buried in code. It didn't take long. Their chemistry was instant, fiery and all-consuming. She challenged him, made him better, pulled him out of his comfort zone. He gave her stability, patience, a sanctuary. They moved fast, got married within a year, and bought their first home together before turning 30. People envied them, and they knew it. The picture-perfect couple with 2 bright kids, a thriving tech career, weekend getaways to Mount Hood, and a marriage that, from the outside, seemed untouched by time. But love, as Ryan would later discover, is not a wall you can build and walk away from. It's a living thing. And sometimes, when you stop tending to it, something else grows in its place. The first seed of doubt didn't come as an explosion. It arrived like a hairline crack in glass, almost invisible, easy to ignore. It started with Elena's sudden semi-retirement. After her firm was acquired by a massive Seattle-based VC group, she told Ryan she was stepping back. It made sense. She'd earned it. But instead of slowing down, she seemed to ramp up. More out-of-town trips, more client dinners, more long hours prepping consulting proposals with a man Ryan had never met. Matthew Langston, a high-profile investor and Elena's former boss. Ryan noticed the shift, subtle as it was. Elena was sharper with the kids, colder in the mornings. She guarded her phone with the kind of vigilance usually reserved for nuclear codes. She started wearing perfume he hadn't smelled before, and undergarments he hadn't seen since their honeymoon phase. But love does strange things to clarity. Ryan pushed the thoughts away. He blamed stress. The kids were growing up fast. His job was demanding. Elena was under pressure. They were both just tired, overextended. He told himself that until the afternoon he found her laptop open on the kitchen table. She was in the shower, and it had buzzed with a calendar notification. Ryan wasn't trying to snoop, but the subject line caught his eye. Seattle weekend, same room this time? He clicked it. The message was from Matthew. Short, suggestive. Laced with innuendo so obvious it made his stomach turn. Elena had replied, "Same suite, same rules. Can't wait." Ryan froze. Not because of the message itself, but because of what came next, his own reaction. He didn't scream. Didn't throw the laptop. Didn't even confront her. Instead, he quietly walked to the bathroom door, leaned his forehead against it, and let the cool wood numb his thoughts. He stood there for maybe 5 minutes, listening to the sound of water, and trying to remember the last time they'd taken a shower together. That night, he said nothing, just kissed her goodnight and stared at the ceiling long after she fell asleep. By morning, he'd made a decision. He called Trevor, the only person he trusted with this kind of thing. A former Marine turned private investigator, Trevor had helped. Friends navigate everything from corporate espionage to messy divorces. Ryan didn't want drama. He wanted the truth. Clean. Undeniable. "What do you need from me?" Trevor asked. "Just find out if I'm crazy," Ryan replied. He wasn't. 2 weeks later, Trevor handed him a brown envelope over coffee. His hand lingered on it longer than necessary. "You sure about this?" Ryan nodded. "Open it." Inside were dozens of high-resolution images. Elena and Matthew, entering and leaving hotels, sharing drinks, walking hand-in-hand through Pike Place Market like teenagers sneaking out of prom. One image showed them in a rooftop suite, Elena wearing the same dress she claimed was for a networking gala. There was also a flash drive, security footage, Trevor explained, from a hidden cam in the suite. You might want to sit down before you watch it. Ryan never pressed play. It sat on his desk for days. Maybe he didn't need to see it. The photos were enough. The calendar invites, the late nights, the disinterest. All of it had become a mosaic, sharp and undeniable. He booked a therapy session, not for himself, but to ask one question. How do I protect my kids from this without destroying them? The therapist said something Ryan would never forget. Your kids don't need you to be perfect. They need you to be whole. And that's when the idea of the box took shape. He didn't want to scream. He didn't want to plead. He didn't want revenge in the traditional sense. He wanted Elena to feel what it was like to be blindsided by truth, to be stripped of illusion, to be handed the full weight of betrayal, not with fury, but with precision. So he started preparing. He printed the photos, wrote a short, piercing letter, added his wedding ring, cut their wedding photo down the middle, placed it all in a handcrafted wooden box, the kind you'd use for keepsakes, or confessions. The last item he added was the flash drive. He never watched it, but he knew what it contained, and that was enough. He scheduled delivery for the weekend Elena would be in Malibu. A business retreat, she'd said. Ryan knew better. The Airbnb they'd rented was a 2-bedroom beach house with glass walls and ocean views. On Saturday at precisely 2:15 p.m., while Matthew and Elena were inside, caught in their bubble of secrecy and lies, the courier arrived. Left the box at the door. Rang once. Then he walked away, leaving behind the quiet that always comes before something breaks. At that moment, Ryan was hundreds of miles away, sitting on a bench overlooking the Columbia River Gorge, watching the wind roll across the water. He didn't feel triumph, he didn't feel anger, he felt empty. And that scared him more than anything else, because it meant something inside him had shifted, quietly but completely. Something had cracked, not just between him and Elena, but inside the very foundation of who he believed himself to be. He didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. By the time Elena opened the box, the game was no longer hers to play. The silence had already chosen its side. There are moments in life when time doesn't just slow down, it fragments. It warps. It becomes a cruel echo chamber, where every sound feels magnified, every thought dangerously sharp. That's what it felt like for Ryan Cooper the night after the package had been delivered to Malibu. He didn't sleep. Not really. He lay awake in a rented cabin deep in the Columbia River Gorge, alone with the darkness and the ticking metronome of his thoughts. The fire had burned down hours ago, yet he hadn't moved. His phone remained silent. No calls from Elena, no messages. No excuses, no pleas, not yet. Trevor hesitated. You okay? He imagined the moment they opened the box, Elena and Matthew, naked in more ways than one. He could see Elena's fingers trembling as she peeled away the lid, the recognition settling in her chest like lead. He wondered which item hit her the hardest. The photos? The flash drive? The wedding ring? Or maybe the torn photo. The memory of their wedding day, sliced right through the middle, her smile severed from his. He didn't feel satisfaction, only silence. And a weight so vast, he wondered if it would ever lift. By morning, his phone finally rang. It was Trevor. "They got it," he said simply. Ryan didn't respond. They panicked. Delivery guy said the woman went pale. The man freaked out, tried to chase him down the driveway, yelled something about calling the cops. But there's nothing illegal about sending your own property to your spouse. Still, Ryan said nothing. Trevor hesitated. "You okay?" "No," Ryan replied quietly, "but I'm getting there." He ended the call and walked outside, letting the wind rush over his skin. The sun was rising, casting the trees in gold. In a different life, he might have stood here with Elena, their kids laughing inside, breakfast cooking. That life felt impossibly far away now, like a story he had once read and believed was his. Back in Portland, Ryan returned home with a single goal: to finalize everything. There would be no confrontation, no shouting matches in the kitchen, no theatrical showdowns. That wasn't who he was. He didn't want revenge. He wanted closure. He met with Angela Ruiz, a high-powered divorce attorney known for her tactical brilliance and fierce loyalty to her clients. She was sharp, compassionate, and didn't flinch when Ryan laid everything out on her desk. The photos, the flash drive, the timeline. "I've seen worse," she said calmly. "But this is long and deliberate. We can work with this." She explained the options: custody, property, asset division. She pointed out that because Ryan had been the primary caregiver for Emma and Liam over the last few years, due to Elena's constant travel, he had a strong case for primary custody, particularly now, with Elena's choices laid bare. "You think she'll fight it?" Ryan asked. Angela tilted her head. "She'll try, especially if Langston is still in the picture. He's wealthy, connected, but people like him don't like being dragged into legal messes. If he's smart, he'll pull away. If he doesn't, we'll use him." Ryan nodded, absorbing every word like scripture. There was a clarity to Angela that steadied him. That night, Ryan finally sat at his desk and plugged in the flash drive. He told himself he didn't need to see it, that the photos were enough, that the betrayal had already landed. But deep down, something remained unsettled. There were questions still whispering in the back of his mind. Not about what Elena had done, but about who she had become. And maybe, just maybe, watching would help him kill whatever part of him still believed in her. The screen came alive. The footage was grainy, but clear. A wide shot from the corner of a hotel room, dim lights, wine glasses, familiar laughter. And then she entered the frame. Elena, hair tied loosely, wearing a silk dress he'd seen before. The same one she wore to their anniversary dinner 2 years ago. Matthew followed behind her, hands all over her like he didn't care about foreplay or pretense. They moved like people who had done this 100 times. And maybe they had. What struck Ryan wasn't the sex. It wasn't the betrayal in action. It was what came after. The small moments. The conversation. The way Elena lay on her side, giggling, playfully tracing circles on Matthew's chest. The way she talked about the kids like they were background noise. The way she spoke of Ryan as though he were a distant relative. Kind, dependable, irrelevant. "He's great with the kids," she said, sipping wine. "He's so steady. I think he suspects something, but he's too passive to confront it." Matthew had laughed, smug. "You've got him trained." And then Elena had said something Ryan would never forget. "I love my kids. And I do care for Ryan, but I can't go back to being someone's wife. With you, I feel awake, like myself, not just someone's mother or someone's partner. I get to be a woman again." The words hit harder than any moan or movement could. In them was the full truth, not just about the affair, but about her quiet disconnection from him, from their life. She had outgrown their marriage. Or perhaps she believed she had. Ryan stopped the video, removed the drive, stared at the blank screen, wondering if this is how people die on the inside. Slowly, quietly, watching the person they love become a stranger before their eyes. The next morning, he made a decision. He filed for divorce. Trevor hesitated. "You okay?" He requested primary custody, citing Elena's repeated absences and emotional detachment. He included a detailed affidavit with Trevor's findings, timelines, and evidence. And then he waited. 3 days later, Elena showed up at the house. Ryan was in the backyard, raking leaves with Liam when he heard the front door open. She didn't knock. "Ryan?" her voice called, uncertain. "Can we talk?" Liam looked up at his dad, confused. Ryan handed him the rake. "Go inside, buddy. Help. Your sister set the table for dinner." Liam hesitated, sensing something heavy in the air, but he obeyed. Elena walked onto the patio, wearing jeans and a gray sweater. Her eyes were puffy, and her posture was smaller than usual. She looked like someone who had been crying for days. "I got your papers," she said, voice hoarse. Ryan nodded but didn't speak. "I guess I deserve that," she added. Ryan tilted his head slightly. "Guess?" She winced. "I'm sorry, Ryan. I know that doesn't mean much. I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied evenly. "Everything I needed to know, you already said, on video." She looked down, ashamed. "I didn't plan for it to be this way," she whispered. "It just happened. Then it kept happening. And then I didn't know how to stop." "You didn't want to stop," Ryan corrected her gently. She nodded slowly. "Maybe I didn't." There was a long pause between them, filled only by the soft rustling of wind through autumn leaves. "I miss them," she said suddenly, voice breaking. "Emma and Liam. I miss being here." Ryan's face didn't change. "They miss you too, but they're angry and confused. And I'm not going to lie to them to protect you. Not anymore." "I want to fix it," Elena said, eyes shining with desperation. "Can't we?" "No," Ryan said, and this time there was no softness. "We can't." He stepped forward, not to threaten her, but to be clear. "You burned the bridge, Elena. You didn't just have an affair. You lived another life. You made me feel crazy for noticing. You used me to cover for you. And now that he's pulling away, now that you've been caught, you want your safe place back. But I'm not your safety net anymore." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I'm going to be civil," Ryan continued, "because our kids deserve that. But you and we're done." She nodded, unable to argue. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "I did love you," she said softly. Ryan didn't look back. "Maybe you did, but not enough." As she disappeared down the hallway, Ryan felt the first real breath enter his lungs in days. The worst part was over. The truth was no longer hidden, and for the first time in a long time, he felt something stir deep inside him. Not joy, not relief, but power. The power that comes from finally seeing things as they are. The silence in Ryan Cooper's house had taken on a different texture. It wasn't the peaceful kind he used to cherish on weekend mornings, the quiet that followed the clinking of coffee mugs and soft footsteps down the hallway. No, this was a calculated, dense silence. It was the silence of planning, of patience. The kind you feel before a storm breaks or a wire is cut. It had been nearly 2 weeks since Ryan filed for divorce. Elena hadn't returned to the house since their conversation on the patio. She'd retreated into the shadows, hiding behind her lawyer and her own embarrassment. Matthew Langston had gone even quieter, presumably trying to preserve what was left of his sterling public image. And yet, despite the unraveling of his marriage, Ryan didn't feel hollow anymore. He felt sharpened, like a blade dragged across stone. What surprised him most wasn't the anger, it was the clarity. He found himself moving through the world with a new kind of precision. Every movement, every word he spoke to his children, every decision he made at work. He did it with the focus of a man rebuilding from the inside out. There was no longer room for confusion. He had been betrayed, lied to, used, and yet he had survived the impact. Now it was time to shape what came next. Angela Ruiz, his attorney, had laid out their strategy like a battle plan. Maintain composure, document everything, and do not, under any circumstances, let emotion derail the case. The person who stays calm controls the narrative, she said. Let her scramble. Let him disappear. You hold the facts. That's your power. Ryan listened. He showed up at every parent-teacher conference, packed lunches, picked up Liam from soccer practice and stayed late to help clean up cones. He began keeping a journal, not for court, but for himself, to trace his own emotions, to make sure that what he was becoming wasn't born of vengeance. He didn't want to emerge from this storm angry. He wanted to come out whole, but that didn't mean he'd forgive easily. Trevor hesitated. You okay? In quiet moments, when the kids were asleep and the dishes were done, Ryan would sit at his desk and look at the stack of files Trevor had compiled. Photographs, call logs, timestamps, even transcribed snippets of audio from a dinner Elena had shared with Matthew in Vancouver just a few months ago. They spoke so casually, so freely about the life they were building on the side. The word divorce was even tossed around, though more as a hypothetical threat than a plan. She'd never leave him, Matthew had said with a smirk audible through the recording. He's too safe, too steady. But I'm telling you, if he ever finds out, I'll handle it. Ryan had listened to that part more than once. Not because it hurt, it did, but because of the way Matthew's voice carried arrogance, as if Ryan was some domesticated pet to be dealt with. A harmless man in a nice sweater. It lit a fire in his gut, not because of pride, but because of what that condescension said about how far gone Elena really was. One evening, as Emma sat at the dining table working on a school project and Liam was in the living room sketching superheroes in his notebook, Ryan drafted a new kind of letter, one not to Elena, but to himself. It wasn't a list of affirmations or platitudes. It was a commitment. He wrote, I will not let what happened define me. I will not shrink from this pain, but I will not let it swallow me. I will protect my children. I will protect my peace, and I will never again doubt what I know to be true. It was the kind of letter a man writes when he decides he is done bleeding. That same night, Trevor called. I've got something else, he said. A recording. This one's different. Ryan hesitated. Different how? It was picked up by a hotel bar mic in San Diego. Public conversation. But you'll want to hear it. He sent the file. Ryan waited until the kids were asleep, made a cup of tea. He'd given up caffeine since the sleepless weeks after the discovery, and sat down to listen. The recording began with indistinct background chatter, clinking glasses. Then came Matthew's voice, unmistakably tipsy. She says she loves him, he was telling someone. But not enough to leave. I mean, she's got the house, the kids, the stability. But every time we're together, she looks alive. Like really alive, you know? I told her, pick me or don't, but don't expect me to wait forever. Then came a woman's voice, one Ryan didn't recognize. "So what happens if he finds out?" Matthew laughed. "She said she'd threaten him in court. She's got some financial leverage, I guess. Retirement funds, equity from his company. Plus, I doubt he has the stomach to fight." Ryan's jaw clenched. The gall, the cowardice, the sheer casual cruelty of it. He forwarded the audio to Angela. She called 10 minutes later. "This is gold," she said. "He's admitting coercion, leverage, intent. It's circumstantial, but paired with the rest, it paints a very clear picture." Ryan felt something loosen in his chest, not because he wanted to punish Elena, but because he now had all the tools to protect himself and his kids. The next step wasn't legal. It was emotional. He met with a counselor, Dr. Leland, a soft-spoken man with a dry sense of humor and a quiet way of unpacking grief. At first, Ryan had resisted the idea. He wasn't broken. He wasn't unraveling. But it was Dr. Leland who reframed the work in a way that finally clicked. "This isn't about healing your marriage," he said. "This is about healing your perception of yourself. You saw yourself as a husband, a protector. Now, you need to see yourself as a survivor, not just of betrayal, but of disillusionment." Ryan nodded, feeling the truth settle in. As days became weeks, Elena's lawyer reached out to begin formal negotiations. She was no longer contesting the divorce, but she wanted shared custody and partial access to the home. Ryan, under Angela's guidance, declined. "We have enough to show that she voluntarily removed herself from the home, has spent less than 10% of the last 6 months physically present with the kids, and prioritized a long-term affair over family responsibilities. She can visit, but she doesn't get to play house on weekends." Ryan agreed, not out of spite, but out of protection. He also began making small, deliberate changes around the house. He replaced their bed, removed photos from the walls that included Elena, not to erase her, but to create a space where his children could feel grounded again. The house had to feel safe, familiar, theirs. He started cooking more, learning recipes he'd once avoided. The kids noticed. "This is actually good," Emma said one night after trying his honey garlic chicken. "No offense." "Some taken," Ryan said with a grin. Liam laughed. "You should open a restaurant." Trevor hesitated. "You okay?" "Maybe I will. We'll call it Dad's Revenge. Only open on weekends. And I make whatever I feel like." They all laughed. And in that moment, Ryan realized something. This was the part of life no one prepares you for. Not the heartbreak, but the rebirth. The moment when laughter returns, not because the pain is gone, but because you've finally made space for both. Then came the moment Ryan knew would change everything. He walked past Emma's room one night and heard her crying. Not loudly, just soft, muffled sobs into her pillow. He knocked, entered gently. "What's wrong?" She wiped her cheeks, embarrassed. "I miss her," she whispered. "Even after everything, I still miss her." Ryan sat beside her, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "That's okay," he said. "You're allowed to miss her. You're allowed to love her. Just because someone hurt us doesn't mean we stop feeling." Emma leaned into him. "Do you still love her?" Ryan took a breath. "I love who I thought she was. I love the part of her that gave me you and Liam. But I don't love what she became. And that's something I'm learning to live with." Emma nodded. "I just wish things could go back to how they were." Ryan looked at his daughter, so young, yet so wise. "I know, sweetheart. So do I. But sometimes things don't go back. They go forward. And forward can be scary. But it can also be beautiful." That night, as he lay in bed, Ryan felt the weight of his choices settle more firmly. He wasn't just moving through this divorce. He was evolving. The next morning, he emailed Angela. Let's move forward with full custody. No shared property. No visitation without structure. I'm ready. She responded within the hour. Understood. Let's get to work. Outside, autumn had begun to give way to winter. The leaves had mostly fallen. The trees stood bare, unapologetic, exposed. And yet, they were not dead. They were simply preparing for something new. Ryan understood that now. He too had been stripped down to the truth, and soon something else would grow in its place. The first real snow of the season dusted Portland in early December, thin enough to melt by noon, but thick enough to leave a hush over the streets. It was the kind of morning where you could hear your breath, the kind of morning where the world felt fragile, suspended. Ryan stood on the porch with a mug of black coffee in hand, watching the wind lift powdered snow from the eaves like ash from a long dead fire. He had waited for this moment, not the snow, but what it signified, the stillness before disruption. Elena was in Malibu again. The same Airbnb, the same man, the same suite with floor-to-ceiling windows and silk linens and the pretense of business strategy as a mask for something darker. Matthew had sent a message to his assistant just 2 days earlier, confirming the trip, and Trevor had intercepted it like clockwork. Patterns, after all, were comforting to the arrogant. This time, however, Ryan wasn't sending a package. He was sending closure. At 5:30 p.m. that Saturday, while Elena and Matthew were sharing dinner, lobster, judging from the photos Trevor managed to snap from a rented fishing boat anchored just off the cove. A man in a gray hoodie rang the bell of the luxury property. He wore gloves, carried no badge, and didn't speak. He handed Elena a sealed envelope and stepped back, waiting for her to sign. Another man followed behind him moments later, arms full with 2 large boxes and a brown paper bag marked Fragile. Ryan wasn't there, but he didn't need to be. He had imagined it countless times. Elena opening the envelope, her eyes catching the bold letters of the restraining order, the summons, the confirmation of the lawsuit filed against her lover, the photographs, the notarized statements, and the small paper bag containing what remained of her wedding gown, burnt to ashes, sealed in a plastic pouch, resting atop a note in Ryan's handwriting. You chose him. You chose this. You can keep it. Later that evening, Ryan got a text from Trevor. Delivery complete. They're not taking it well. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. The weight that had clung to him for months began to loosen. Not in a triumphant, vengeful way, but in quiet finality. A door hadn't just closed. It had been sealed shut. The next morning, Ryan dressed early. He was hosting Emma's birthday party, her 11th, and he had promised her the kind of celebration that would eclipse everything else. Balloons filled the backyard. A magician was scheduled to arrive at noon. Emma had chosen a galaxy theme, complete with cupcakes decorated like planets. It was the first time Ryan had seen her excited in weeks. Around 10, his doorbell rang again. This time, the visitors were expected. Trevor hesitated. You okay? George and Lorraine, Elena's parents, stood at the front door, holding wrapped gifts and a Tupperware container of homemade tamales. Their expressions were unsure, gentle. Ryan invited them in without hesitation. I appreciate you being here, he said, taking the food. Wouldn't miss it, Lorraine replied softly. I heard, George added, scratching his gray beard. Ryan nodded. It had to be done. George met his eyes. If it means anything, I think you did the right thing. Emma's laughter echoed from the kitchen, where she and Liam were decorating name tags for their friends. Lorraine smiled. At least she's smiling again. They both are, Ryan said. It's different, but better. The party unfolded like something from a movie, bright, noisy, full of sugar and joy. Parents mingled in the yard, sipping cider while children tore through the obstacle course Ryan had set up. For a few hours, the house felt light again, whole. But around 4, the mood shifted. Natalie, Matthew's sister, arrived with her daughter. Ryan hadn't seen her since before everything fell apart, but her presence sent a cold ripple down his spine. She smiled tightly, holding a wrapped gift. "John told me about the party," she said. "Denise didn't want to miss it." Ryan stepped aside, letting the little girl through, but his gaze stayed locked on Natalie. "I'm surprised you came." "I thought it was time we spoke," she said carefully. They moved to the side of the yard, out of earshot. "I suppose you know I filed against you as well," Ryan began. "I do," she said. "My lawyer said you have reason to believe I helped cover for them." "You were more than a bystander," Ryan replied. "You were her confidant. You sat in my house. You smiled in my face, all while knowing." Natalie looked down. "I didn't want to be part of it. I didn't agree with it. But you let it happen," Ryan said, his voice steady. "You watched my life fall apart in slow motion and said nothing." "I didn't know how," she whispered. "You could have said one word." They stood in silence for a long moment. Finally, Natalie nodded. "You're right. I failed you. I failed Elena too. Maybe not in the way you think, but I enabled her. I helped her lie to herself. I told her that what she was doing was complicated, not cruel. That's on me." Ryan's jaw tightened. "I don't hate you, Natalie, but I'll never trust you again. And for that reason, I need you to go." Her face fell. "Denise, she can stay. Emma will love that. But you can't." Natalie nodded and turned away, gathering her things. As she walked off, she paused. "For what it's worth, I think you're doing right by them." Later that night, after the last balloon had deflated and the kids were tucked in, Ryan sat on the couch with a whiskey he hadn't planned on pouring. The silence was no longer menacing. It was earned, deserved. He scrolled through the messages on his phone. One from Angela confirmed the restraining order had been successfully served to both Elena and Matthew. Another informed him that the court date was set for early February. Then came the unexpected call. It was Elena. The name on the screen froze him. For a moment he considered ignoring it, but something in him wanted to know. He answered. Her voice was cracked, barely above a whisper. "Why?" He didn't respond. "Why would you humiliate me like that?" Ryan exhaled. Humiliation wasn't the goal. Truth was. "You sent ashes, my wedding dress. You burned this marriage a long time ago," he said. "I just gave you back what was left." A long pause. Then, "I didn't think you'd ever do something like this." "That's the problem," Ryan said. "You thought I was soft. You confused kindness with weakness." "I lost everything," she murmured. "So, did I," he said. "But the difference is, I'm building again." There was a beat of silence before she said the thing that took him off guard. "I miss them. I miss the kids." "They miss you too," he admitted. "But they don't understand. And they're angry. I want to fix it." "You can't," he said softly. "But you can stop making it worse." Elena's breath hitched. "I'm not going to keep you from them," Ryan added. "But I'm going to protect them from this version of you. I don't know who I am anymore." "You're going to have to figure that out," Ryan replied. "Not for me, for them." The call ended there. No goodbyes, just silence. 3 days later, Elena's lawyer proposed a visitation schedule. Supervised weekends, no overnights. Ryan agreed under the condition that Matthew was never present. It wasn't perfect, but it was structure, and the kids needed that. When Elena saw them for the first time since Malibu, it was in the neutral setting of her parents' house. Emma didn't run to her. Liam didn't smile, but they sat with her, talked, listened. It was more than Ryan had expected. Trevor hesitated. "You okay?" As he drove them home that night, Emma finally spoke. Why did she do it? Ryan didn't know how to answer. He tried to find words that didn't place blame but didn't excuse either. "Sometimes people think they're missing something," he said, "and instead of fixing what they have, they look somewhere else." Emma was quiet. Then, "Will you ever forgive her?" "I'm working on it," he said. She nodded and turned back to the window. "I hope she's working on it too." Ryan's eyes stung. Not from sadness, from pride. A week later, Ryan signed the final documents Angela had prepared. Elena would have partial visitation. No claim to the house. No claim to retirement assets. Ryan kept full custody. The court had accepted their agreement without hesitation. The judge even offered a few quiet words. "You've handled this with more grace than most people ever could." That night, after dinner, Ryan stepped out onto the porch. Snowflakes were beginning to fall again, soft and hesitant. Liam joined him. "Are we okay now?" he asked. Ryan looked at him, heart full. "We're going to be." And for the first time in months, he believed it. Not just as a hope, but as a truth. A quiet, steady truth. One that would carry them forward, wherever the next chapter might lead. The divorce was finalized on a Thursday morning in early spring, the kind of morning that carried with it a quiet warmth, where the wind didn't sting anymore, and the sky was no longer a curtain of gray. Ryan sat in Angela's office. The final. Documents spread across the table like fragments of a long war. He signed without hesitation. No shaking hands. No second thoughts. "You're officially free," Angela said, offering him a small, knowing smile. Ryan nodded, not quite smiling back. It wasn't that he wasn't relieved. He was. But freedom didn't come with fireworks or applause. It came with silence. And that silence was sobering. He stepped out onto the sidewalk, the city humming around him, and for the first time in years, he had no wedding ring, no legal tie to Elena, no unresolved paperwork. There was nothing left to untangle. And that was its own kind of peace. Back home, the kids were at school. He took the day off, not out of celebration, but reflection. He made himself a sandwich, sat at the dining table, and stared out the window at the garden he had begun to restore over the past few months. Weeds pulled, soil turned, tomato sprouts beginning to stretch toward the light. It struck him how symbolic it all was. Elena had moved into a small rental across the river. The visitation schedule was being followed, and though the children were still guarded around her, they had begun to thaw. There were afternoons of board games, occasional laughter. Ryan encouraged it. He never once spoke ill of her to them. They would form their own judgments in time. His job wasn't to poison their perception. It was to protect their growth. He had learned something important in therapy. Forgiveness isn't a transaction. It's a practice, a process. Some days he felt far from it. Other days, closer than expected. But trust, that was another matter entirely. Ryan no longer placed trust in words. He watched for consistency, for action. He had stopped needing people to promise him things. He just wanted to see if they showed up. And that shift, subtle as it was, changed everything. It made him better at his job, more grounded as a father, more present as a man. In late June, Ryan took the kids on a road trip. Emma had finished 6th grade with honors. Liam had joined the local robotics club and was already talking about building a drone. They loaded the car with snacks, sunscreen, and playlists and headed south toward California, stopping along the coast, hiking short trails, collecting memories. One night, in Big Sur, they camped near the cliffs, the ocean a steady roar just beyond the trees. As the stars came out, Emma lay beside him in her sleeping bag and whispered, "This is my favorite version of you." Ryan turned, smiling gently. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," she said. "You just feel lighter." He stared up at the sky for a while, then answered, "That's because I let go of what was never mine." Back in Portland, life resumed. Quieter now, simpler. He cooked most nights, volunteered at Liam's school for their science fair, started journaling again. The house no longer felt like a monument to a failed marriage. It felt like a home. His home. One rebuilt with care and new intention. Trevor hesitated. "You okay?" And sometimes, that's all growth needs to begin. Ryan never told them the full story. Maybe someday, when they were older, he'd share the details. But for now, he gave them something better. Stability, presence, unwavering love. And every now and then, when the house was quiet and the night was kind, he'd sit on the porch alone, sipping tea, staring at the stars, and marvel at the man he had become. Not bitter, not broken, but free. And that freedom, earned through pain, carved from truth, was more powerful than anything he had ever known. Ryan Cooper's story began like many of ours, with love, trust, and the belief that the vows we make under the soft glow of wedding lights will somehow shield us from life's darkest betrayals. He wasn't a man looking for trouble. He was simply a man building a life, one morning at a time, one school, lunch at a time, one mortgage payment, one kiss on the forehead, a father, a husband, a builder of small, sacred things. But sometimes, even when you do everything right, the ground beneath you gives way. When Ryan first discovered Elena's betrayal, it wasn't the affair itself that shattered him. It was the years. 12 years of intimacy, of holidays and milestones, of whispered promises and shared dreams, undermined by a hidden life. A life she lived with Matthew Langston, a man who saw Ryan as an afterthought, a placeholder, a safe bet. That realization nearly broke him. He could have exploded. He could have confronted Elena in a blaze of rage. He could have exposed her in public, turned the children against her, burned every trace of their history in a fit of vengeance. And no one would have blamed him. But Ryan didn't. Instead, he chose something far more powerful: restraint. Because power, he learned, wasn't in reacting, it was in rebuilding. With the help of Trevor, his ex-Marine friend turned private investigator, and Angela Ruiz, the attorney who handled truth like a blade, Ryan built a quiet case. Piece by piece, he collected the evidence, not to punish, but to protect. To ensure that when he finally walked away, he would do so not as a victim, but as a man standing on solid ground. He delivered the truth not in person, but in a box, sealed with the finality of his forgiveness expiring. Photos, documents, ashes of a wedding dress, and the weight of a message she could no longer spin or deny. And when he walked away, he didn't do so with fire behind him. He walked away into silence, into reflection, into fatherhood redefined. Ryan didn't lose his children. In the fallout, he became even more rooted in their lives. While Elena had spent years disappearing into conference rooms and hotel suites, Ryan had been present. He knew their lunch orders, their favorite bedtime stories, the names of their classmates. And when the time came to fight for custody, the truth was already written in their routines. He didn't win them over. He had never left. Emma and Liam remained the beating heart of his journey, and it was for them that he chose healing over hatred, structure over chaos, truth over illusion. And yet, that healing was not linear. There were sleepless nights, quiet cries on the porch, and moments of crippling doubt. There were birthday parties with empty chairs, difficult questions from his daughter, and awkward handoffs at visitation drop-offs. There were moments he thought the worst was behind him, only to feel it rise again, like a tide. But slowly, through therapy, journaling, and the sacredness of small, intentional choices, Ryan rebuilt himself. Planted vegetables in the yard. He cooked meals that became rituals. He painted the walls, rearranged the furniture, and turned the house from a shared museum of lost promises into a sanctuary of new beginnings. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, something extraordinary happened. He fell in love again, not recklessly, not blindly, but with care. Claire, a travel nurse from Chicago with her own quiet wounds and steady laughter, didn't rush to fill the space left by Elena. She simply walked beside him. She showed up. She listened. And she met his children not as an outsider, but as a companion on the road back to something like joy. And this time, Ryan didn't fall like he had before. He chose. He chose to love with open eyes, with guarded but willing hope, with the wisdom that only deep pain can offer. He didn't forget what happened, but he no longer carried it like a curse. Even Elena, over time, began her own version of reckoning. Not because she was redeemed, but because life had finally made her sit in the ruins she created. Matthew, unsurprisingly, vanished when the court orders came. The man who once promised the world couldn't even stay for the cleanup. She faced her children with tears, remorse, and slowly accountability. It looks like replacing the bed where betrayal happened with one where his kids feel safe. It looks like holding the hand of someone new without flinching. And sometimes healing looks like standing alone in your kitchen at midnight, breathing, deep, realizing you made it. You're still here. And you're not the same, but maybe you're better. So what do we take from Ryan Cooper's story? First, this. Trust your intuition. The signs are often there. Subtle, yes, but real. Don't gaslight yourself into silence. Second, protect your peace. Not every battle is worth your rage. Sometimes the strongest move is walking away with dignity intact and head held high. Third, choose your response. You can't control what others do, but you can control the story you write in response. Ryan didn't let betrayal define him. Let it refine him. Fourth, healing is slow. Let it be. Don't rush into love, revenge, or reinvention. Let yourself feel everything. There is no fast-forward button for pain. And finally, you are not what someone did to you. You are what you do next. If you've ever been betrayed, abandoned, cheated on, or made to feel small, remember this story. Remember Ryan. Because Ryan is proof that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the beginning of the best version of yourself. Not because pain is noble, but because your response to it can be. So if you're sitting in the rubble of your own heartbreak right now, know this. You will rise. You will rebuild. You will laugh again. You will love again. And when you do, it won't be because someone saved you. It'll be because you saved yourself. Thank you for taking the time to walk through this story. We hope it resonated, brought some comfort, or reminded you of your own strength. If this story moved you, inspired you, or helped you see things more clearly, please support the channel by hitting that subscribe button. Your support fuels our passion and helps us keep creating deep, emotional, and empowering stories like this one. There's more to come. More stories of strength, of truth, of people like you, choosing to rise. Subscribe now and let's continue this journey together.